Please welcome John Moore.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you guys got me. I was not expecting those pictures. That was 20 years ago, by the way. So, yes, I did work at Disney World and did get to be a prince, and that was an amazing experience. And as magical as that was, I have to say the work I'm doing now is even more magical. I absolutely love doing family constellations, and really that is what's going to happen if you can be here this afternoon for the workshop. Magic is going to happen here. Just like that, we already have songs playing in the background. It's beautiful here. So thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you all the live streamers. Good to have you here. We know that there is no separation in truth. We're all here, right here in the heart. And that saying that home is where the heart is, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's because we all know that it's so obvious. And I really feel at home here, so thank you for welcoming me back home. And I know, did you guys know that you're all miracles? Did you know that? I bet you do. This is Oak Brook Center for Spiritual Living. You probably do know that, but some of you know one of my other passions is A Course in Miracles. And one of the miracle principles is that anything that comes from love is a miracle. And you all came from love. So hello, all you miracles out there. Today I want to talk about a couple of words that might be a little scary to some of you. They're both F words, but not that one. But for some of you that might be as shocking as dropping the F word at a Baptist barbecue. Family and forgiveness. And those two words, sometimes we're born into families that can be very challenging. And so I want to offer some definitions of what forgiveness is and what forgiveness isn't, and then talk about how we can shift that perception, because that's another definition of a miracle, is a shift in perception from fear to love. And there's actually 3 steps to true forgiveness that A Course in Miracles outlines, and I'm going to give you those steps, and we're going to practice them, and I'm going to share some stories from my own life. I've had some, I call them forgiveness opportunities lately. We've all had some forgiveness opportunities, and so it's just a beautiful process to see things differently. And that is exactly what family constellations is, and I'll tell you a little bit about that at the end of my talk. So, what forgiveness isn't, because a lot of us resist it, because we think if I forgive somebody, then I'm saying what they did was okay, and I'm actually open to it happening again, and they get off the hook, and they don't pay the consequences, and I'm saying that it might happen again. And that's really not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness isn't a magic wand that you wave and you say, well, I'm spiritual. I attend the Center for Spiritual Living here in Ocala, and I'm a better person, and what you did was really terrible, but I am a better person, so I'm going to forgive you. But if it happens to serve me later, I might bring it up again, just to let you know that I'm a better person than you. And I might forget it for a while, but if we get in a really big fight, then I might bring it up again 2 years later. And that's not what A Course in Miracles describes as forgiveness. And one of the most profound definitions of forgiveness I've ever heard was on the Oprah Winfrey Show. And she had a guest on her show, Jerry Jampolsky, who I didn't know at the time was a Course in Miracles student. And he actually has an organization called the Attitudinal Healing International. And they do amazing work, like all of you are doing here, to shift and do things. Their website is ahinternational.org if you want to look it up. But he was on Oprah, and he defined forgiveness as giving up the hope that the past will be different than it was. And that stopped Oprah in her tracks. And it was one of those tweetable moments that she talks about. She actually talked about that episode in one of her life classes on her network. But how powerful is that? Giving up the hope that the past will be different than it was. And because when you do that, you're accepting what happened. This is what it was. I can't change what happened, but how do I move forward with that? How do I keep going and not be carrying all that baggage from the past? So the 3 steps that A Course in Miracles describes for forgiveness, and the first one, and again, you all have been doing this for a while, and if you're new, you'll catch up, because I know the energy in here is amazing. But we can all agree that we are co-creating our experience with Spirit, yes? That we are co-creators of our own reality on some level. Life isn't happening to us, it's coming from us. And our thoughts create our reality. And I got to hear a lovely story about how Donna and Norma manifested the beautiful home that they were so gracious to host me in last night. Thank you. And it's about, they just kept in mind what they wanted. What do I want? And so the first step in forgiveness is when something happens, to stop and realize that in some way, on some level, I am creating this. And that's not always a fun thing to think about, because a lot of things are not enjoyable. But on some level, I am co-creating everything that happens to me. The second step is letting go of whatever the thing is that we think happened. And the third step is replacing it with something else. So very basic steps. 1, stop. Remember that I am creating this on some level. 2, let go of what's happening. And 3, replace it with something else. Now let me give you a practical example of that. So I just leased a new car a couple of months ago. My old lease a Toyota ran, were expired. And I got a new car, and I've been traveling a lot, so I came home and my car was filthy. So I'm like, I'm really gonna clean this car. Like I wanna just start fresh with this car, because I had some issues with it, getting it, and so I had some thoughts in my mind that were not the most loving about this new car. I thought, oh, I got taken advantage of. And so I came home from my last trip. I took some sage and I cleared the energy in my car. I opened up all the doors under the hood, and I just stood there and I blessed the car, and I walked around the car, and I dropped some essential oil in there, the purification oil from Young Living. This isn't a commercial for them, but it's good stuff. And then I played a beautiful Deva Premal song, Narasimha, which is, I've been told, is an energy clearing mantra. And then I went for my beach walk, and right after my walk, I went to the car wash, and I just imagined all the water raining down on my car, blessing it. And then I vacuumed it, and I imagined any energy that wasn't serving in that car, just sucking all that energy up and clearing the energy in my car. And I got home, and then I washed all the windows, inside and out. Just everything was clear, vision clear. And my car was sparkling. It was like, oh my God, I've never seen it look so good. And the energy felt great. And a friend of mine, we went to dinner, and she got in the car. She's like, wow, it feels really good in your car. And so I was so happy about it. The next day, my landlord hired somebody to power wash all the balconies and the walls. And I went down to my car, and it was covered with debris and water spots. I was like, you have got to be kidding me. The very next day, just another forgiveness opportunity. Practice what you preach, John. So I was so angry, and it felt to me like it was a personal attack. Like this power washer did something to me purposely, knowing that my car was clean, and just ruined everything. When the truth is, he was just doing his job. And so those 3 steps, I had to stop and realize that on some level, I am co-creating this. It wasn't my landlord that did something to hire him on that day. It wasn't the power washer. I was actually happy because our stairs and balconies needed cleaning. And once I remembered that, then I said, okay, let it go. And what does let it go really mean? It means stop talking about it, stop thinking about it, stop telling your friends how terrible it was that this happened, stop writing about it, stop blogging about it, stop, just not think about it, not give it any more energy. And the third step, replace it with something else. And I like to say this little prayer whenever something happens that I don't like. Spirit, help me to see this differently. Thank you for helping me to see this differently. And when I said that, it occurred to me, well, I really wanted to give this car a clean and thorough clearing. So running it through the car wash one more time really made sure that that car was clean. And after all, I think it cost me $5 to run it through the car wash again. We're not talking about some exorbitant amount of money, and I am abundant, and so it just was one of those things. And I really did feel better. Now, here I am talking about it again, but only as a teaching example that those steps work. Now, you're saying, well, that's nice, John, that's a $5 car wash, but what about my family? What about these things in life where we lose a job, or a relationship ends, or we have an illness, or something like that? It still works. About 10 years ago now, I was in a relationship, 4.5-year relationship, and I thought I was in a monogamous relationship, but found out that I was not in a monogamous relationship. So we went our separate ways, we tried to work it out, and I had to go back to our apartment to get a phone charger or something. So it was in a drawer. I opened the drawer, and there I saw pictures of my former boyfriend with somebody else, and it was during the time that we were still together. And it felt like somebody hit me in the heart with a sledgehammer. I was just, and had not been told the truth about that. So, again, stop, realize that there's part of me that is creating this, that I can see this differently. So I asked that question. I said, Spirit, help me to see this situation differently. And what popped into my head was, well, John, part of the reason you were staying was because you felt like this person couldn't be by himself, like he needed to have a partner, and who's going to help him, who's going to take care of him. That was part of my own programming from the next story I'll tell you. But here, so one of the reasons I stayed so long was because I felt like he wouldn't be okay without me. And guess what? He had somebody already. He wasn't alone. So I would not have thought of that. In my angry, hurt, wounded, how dare he do that, I would not have been able to think of that. However, in that state, when I asked Spirit to drop something else into my mind that was going to help me, that's when I had that thought, well, you can leave now. Everything is fine. And I won't say that I didn't have moments where I still felt bad, and I still felt hurt, and I still felt betrayed. But in that moment, when the pain was so deep, that thought helped me. Now, the family, the other F word I want to talk about, is where it can really be challenging, because these are people that we are connected to throughout our entire lives, no matter what. Even if we don't see them, even if we were adopted and we don't know our biological parents, we still have a connection, and our soul longs to have a connection. And we, once we're born, we don't get very far from mom in most cases. Usually, for the first 17 years, 16, 17, 18 years, we're there. And our very survival depends on being connected with our family. And in my case, my father passed away when I was 7 through cancer, and my mom started drinking. And alcohol became the way that she dealt with her pain. And I was not happy about that situation. I have older siblings, and most of them were out of the house by then. So there's a 7-year difference between me and my next oldest sister. And so I felt like I got the brunt of it. Like there would be days when my mom would go on a binge, and I would just take money out of her purse and try to, go get food or find a neighbor or something, or do my own laundry. And I was very resentful that I'm 10, my friends don't have to do their own laundry. Why did I have to figure it out? And it was a long road with my mother, and I know that she loved me, and she had some wonderful qualities. She could make a joke about anything, and I think I get some of my sense of humor from her, for sure. So fast forward, I went away to college, kind of felt like I left that behind, but my mother continued to drink. She was in and out of rehabs. She got quite a few DUIs, and eventually, when I moved down here to Florida, and I was in South Florida, and I found the Unity Church in Miami, and I started hearing these wonderful New Thought teachings that all of you hear at Oak Brook. And I thought, if I could get my mom to come to Florida, she could start a whole new life, and she could hang out with me and my spiritual friends, and we would go to church together, and she would leave all that past, all her, shall we say, shenanigans back in New York, and nobody would know her, nobody would judge her, and she could have a fresh start. And she actually was sober at the time. She got in a really bad accident and was forced to go to a rehab, and she was sober for about 2 years. She moved to Fort Lauderdale, not in with me, thank goodness, but in her own place, and it seemed like things were going along great. And then one day I went over, and she was drunk, and it was that sledgehammer in my heart, like, oh, I can't believe everything was so great. And what a fantasy I had that things were going to be different, because of course she brought her thinking with her pain with her. And I felt like, here I am, stuck with this mess again, and my older siblings are all elsewhere. They're all up in New York or Pennsylvania or Maryland, and I'm the one stuck cleaning up her mess again. And let me tell you, I was not happy about it at all. And what I came to understand was that my mother and I signed up for a really powerful lesson on unconditional love. We signed up, I think, for the advanced class to understand and accept each other just as we were. So as soon as I stopped wishing that she didn't drink, things started to change, because I did get to set some healthy boundaries. When that happened, I had been in New Thought long enough to know that I love you, Mom, and I enjoy spending time with you. But if you're drinking, I can't be here. I can't do that. I can't be part of it. It's too hard. So that was just our understanding that if I would go over and visit her and she had been drinking, I would say, I love you, I would give her a hug, and I would leave. And I knew in my head that everything that happened for a reason. Everything that's happened to each and every one of us has brought us to this moment. And I knew it in my head, but there was, in my heart, I was still mad that I had to be the one that was dealing with this again, and that I felt like I got a raw deal. And I listened. So it wasn't until a few days before she passed. She wasn't really conscious. She was laying in her bed, and I listened to this CD called Graceful Passages. And some of you might have heard me talk about that before, but if you know anyone who is at the end of life or nearing the end of life, this CD, this music is an amazing gift from Spirit, because it's wisdom keepers that were interviewed, that they said, what would you tell your grandchildren if you knew you were dying? And they edited what they answered down to like 5-10 minutes. And then Gary Malkin and Michael Stillwater composed music to go along with that. And it just, the way it comes together, the spoken word and the music does something. And so I was gifted that CD by a dear friend of mine right before my mother passed. And at this point she was in hospice, and I listened to that CD with her. And she wasn't really conscious, but I asked the hospice nurse to leave, turn off the soap operas, and I just held my mother's hand. And I listened to that music with her. And I sobbed, probably harder than I've ever sobbed, and just let all that emotion just clear out of me. And that's when it dropped from my head to my heart, that everything that happened for a reason. All the great times, the not so great times, the things that, did everyone see the movie Men in Black? You know how they have that little thing that you would, I wish I had that I could forget some of the images that I saw growing up. But I realized that everything that happened for a reason, so that I could be here, right here in this moment, being blessed to be talking to all of you and sharing our story. And that it brought me to A Course in Miracles, and it brought me to Family Constellations, and it brought me to being a massage therapist. It brought me to working at Disney World. It brought me to massage school. All those things happened sequentially to get me here. So I invite you to think about your life and where you are right now, and what the events were that led you here. Can you see how all the jobs you've had, all the life experiences you've had, have made you who you are? I know Cindy and I were talking about that, and all the jobs that she had prior to being your minister were exactly what she needed to give her the tools to do this. And you know that those pictures of Disney, of me working at Disney, I, believe it or not, I was painfully shy growing up, and I did not want to draw any attention to myself. And being in those parades and having all those people looking at me and taking pictures of me, it was, the first thing I did was I was helping, because there's kids here, those characters that their faces weren't shown. So I got to help Tigger, and I got to help Pluto, and I got to help some of those other furry characters. And no one knew who I was, so I could be as expressive as I wanted to be. And and then I could, go to Publix and no one knew who I was. And so then eventually when I was cast as one of the court dancers in Cinderella's court, like those pictures you saw, it was easier because I already knew that I could do it, just now people are seeing my face. So it prepared me, because otherwise, standing up here, oh my God, wouldn't be happening. So, back to that moment with my mom, right before she passed, I got to thank her for everything, for all those images I wish I could flash out of my mind. Everything, and I really meant it. It wasn't just my head talking. I really meant it. Thank you for all of it, because it absolutely made me the person I am today. And it felt like this beautiful sigh of relief that we got to that point before she died. And so that leads me to talking about, today is Palm Sunday, and it probably would be amiss if I didn't talk about the J guy. And some of you may know that Jesus is the voice of A Course in Miracles. And when, what better example of forgiveness when he was being persecuted like he was. And I think of him like a big brother. I don't think of him like a savior or somebody that I have to worship. I think of him as somebody that figured it out in a really powerful way. And the lesson he came to teach was that, the body isn't real, that they can do whatever they want, but all he did was came to teach love. And that's actually what the Course says is the meaning of the crucifixion, is teach only love, for that is what you are. And when he said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do, and I'm getting mad because my car got dirty from the power washer, and he can forgive people for that. So it really, it's, as we're approaching this time when many people are celebrating that, the thing is people get stuck on the crucifixion and they forget about the part where there is life, that who we really are can't be destroyed. So I want to read you this quote from the Course that says what forgiveness is. Forgiveness takes away what stands between your brother and yourself. It is the wish that you be joined with him and not apart. Forgiveness is the wish to be joined. How many of us have had a fight with a best friend and we just, I can't believe he did that or she did that. And then eventually somebody gives in and makes the first move to say, I'm really sorry the way that happened. And how much better does it feel when you come back together? And even if you don't hang out anymore, even if it's not like it was, but being angry with somebody takes a lot more energy than just forgiving them. So today at 1:30, I'm inviting all of you to come experience something that could very well change your life. It will give you an opportunity to see things from a different perspective. Family constellations is a really powerful tool to help reveal things that we had no idea was keeping us stuck from that happy, prosperous life we were meant to live. And when I started doing this work, I understood my mother a little bit better, because my mother, when my grandmother was pregnant with her, her father died in a diving accident. So she lost her father. She never met her father. And she had, her first pregnancy was, my oldest brother was born premature and he only lived a few days. So she lost her firstborn son. And then my father died when he was 45. So here's 3 big losses in my mother's life. That's a lot of loss for one life. And it helped me to understand why she drank. I mean, that's a lot of pain to want to numb. So I knew those things separately, but I never put them all together. So that's the kind of thing that family constellations can help you with. You can see things that it wasn't personal, just like it wasn't personal that that power washer cleaned all the balconies and the stairs on the day after I cleaned my car. And it wasn't personal that my mother drank to drown her pain. It wasn't anything against me. It was, when I see it from a bigger perspective, then my heart can open and then that's where forgiveness comes in. That's where I can give up the hope that the past will be different than it was, and I can actually say, thank you, Mom. I love you, and I love you all. I hope to see you at 1:30.